Hi, and welcome to Manti's Book Club. Today we continue reading through Professional Witch. If you are watching this on Twitch, you can find previous episodes on my YouTube channel, acidmanticore. The VOD of this episode will be uploaded to my YouTube channel tomorrow or day after, so if this is the first stream that you see, you can safely pause it and go listen to the beginning of the book, or you can continue listening to this one if you want. Let's begin. Today we start with chapter 11. The very morning began at 4:30. I didn't get up that early even as a child, getting ready to go fishing with my older brothers. For a long time I could not understand what the bare-haired vampire in nightgown and white slippers bending over the bed wanted from me, and recklessly declared, "Do with me what you want, but I won't get up," and I covered my head with a pillow. Leon, standing under the open window, suggested that I move into the coffin. They say no one will bother me there, except perhaps a crazy witcher. Who? I became keenly interested, lifting the edge of the pillow above my left ear. Fairy tale character, specialist in grave hunting and killing vampires during their deep naps. Fairy tale? Yes, because we do not sleep in coffins, especially during the day. I don't think you're sleeping at all, I sighed, throwing back the blanket. Show me the day. Here it is. Leon wasn't embarrassed. In the east, the sky brightened a little bit. The stars turned pale, and the crescent moon shone through like a melting piece of ice. The horizon seemed like a white, downy thread. A fluffy moth bumped into an apple tree trunk, slid an elbow and a half down, fiercely working with its legs and wings, and took off again, throwing dead loops and downward spirals, as if returning from a riotous Sabbath. The only thing missing was drunken singing that carried far and wide around in the pre-dawn silence. Finally, the moth managed to find a suitable crack in the bark, where it hid until the evening, covering its wings with a grey shawl, like a grey shawl. I rubbed my eyes thoroughly and threw the blanket aside. It was too late to retreat. I had to get dressed. There is dew here, Leon warned, and I obediently laced up my boots. The dawn craftswoman took up the downy thread. The east was covered with pale golden lace that frightened away the moon and pushed the stars into the dark half of the sky. In a quarter an hour it will be completely bright, Leon promised. Maybe you can get breakfast? I'll wait. I'm not hungry yet. Where are we going? Wherever you look, the vampire shrugged. I don't care, but you'll find something interesting everywhere. Then let's go east. It's brighter there. As you say. We followed the eastern cross, but soon Leon turned left. There was a decrepit shed visible there, by all appearances for a secluded sitting. I hesitated for a moment whether to accompany Leon further, but the vampire took my hand without warning, thereby leaving me no choice. We almost pressed our noses into the cracked door when suddenly the air became fresher. The shed disappeared, and the oak grove began to flutter around us with its hard leaves. The mighty trees kept count for decades, having exchanged their first 100 long ago. The founder of the grove, not an oak, a giant oak 5 times taller than me, inspired awe. Gnarled roots peeked out of the ground in mossy arches. The decayed bark crumbled in places, revealing a pinkish, wind-polished trunk, dissected by a longitudinal crack. The bare top of the ground seemed like a hand stretched out to the sky. On one of the bare fingers sat a disheveled black raven. When it saw me, it swayed with indignation, grabbed the branch with its bluish paws, flapped its wings, and cawed ominously and loudly. The timid whistles of the awakening blackbirds instantly died down. Caw! Caw! The raven strained. Careful! The cry of a blackbird rang through the grove as if through an empty temple. The trunks echoed loudly. Of Leon's voice came to me. What? He repeated louder. The old owner of the grove. He's been nesting in this oak tree since forever. Do you see a bunch of branches in the fork over there? I associated ravens primarily with uncleaned battlefields, and the ravens themselves using them as self-assembled tablecloth. So I sighed with relief when the raven fell silent halfway through his core, shrank, jumped, and took off heavily, noisily, brushing the branches with its hard feathers. The oak, the valley's herbs were pleasing to the eye. The round leaves of the white wallflower, an excellent blood-blocking agent, gleamed in the shadows like dark green coins. Between them swayed thin-legged bluebells, red starlets, grey manes of whooping grass, and in the sunny meadows, small three-petaled flowers, collected in short spikelets, shined golden. Camelinka from Oak Forest, in common parlance, female fidelity. I floated my knowledge of herbalism plucking a dry stalk. Half of the flowers immediately fell off, revealing the sharp marigolds of the pistils. Actually, it is fading. Leon, is it true that there is a vicious circle in the gala? Well, not the most powerful, but you can summon at least a couple of demons. Hardly. It is, let's say, not demonic. Have you tried? I know how it's done, my companion answered evasively. I perked up. Listen, couldn't your monster have escaped from the circle? Since when did it become ours? The vampire shifted his eyebrows. As for the circle, That's out of the question. It has been inactive for about 100 years, and even if I wanted to perform the ritual, one of the 13 stones would be missing. Which circles were called tunnels to the other worlds. More likely not even tunnels, but weak spots in the space between dimensions, which were not difficult even for me to drill through, not to mention the more experienced magicians. All that remained was to get 13 stones and catch a young virgin for sacrifice, or at worst replace her with a chicken. There were 15 officially registered witch circles in Belore alone, of which only one was active. The 13 stones included a 100-carat diamond, and its absence prevented the activation of all the other circles. Other stones: emerald, sapphire, ruby, amethyst, turquoise, mountain crystal, clear agate, smoky and golden topaz, opal, blue, white and green cat's eye, and aquamarine, were pretty common, and with the current state of the stone market, it was not really hard to acquire them. But there were barely a dozen diamonds of suitable size and cut, and for each of them you could build a castle, hire an army, and acquire a harem of 40 people. Emeralds and rubies were rated slightly lower, nevertheless, half of the warlocks had them. Already purchased, the stones threw another trick at their owner. They had memory, and once used in the ritual, made it much easier to reactivate their own circle. But if one of the reacquainted stones fell out, say topaz, the circle was no longer good for anything, and a new one had to be made. I was taught that one should resort to the help of witch circles only in extreme cases, because it was almost impossible to predict what could break out of the circle, especially for the first time. On the other side of the line could be fluttering butterflies or a whole legion of hungry ghouls, not inclined to peaceful negotiations. To top all the troubles, the circle could work chaotically and only in one direction. For example, such as Kolodishin Bezdin, located 3 miles from Starmin, near the village of Kolodishi. Once activated, it could not be turned off, and basilisks periodically swarmed out of it. Neither the residents of Kolodishi nor the basilisks themselves experienced intense joy from the frequent meetings, and either green boots made of scaly leather appeared on sale, or stone statues of human height were erected on rural streets, which, as the textbook stated, was a typical fear response for a basilisk. Starman magicians had long ago given up on Kolodishin Bezdin and refused to visit the ill-fated village every week off-road. Therefore, the statues were accumulated in an empty barn from fall to fall, and from basically each half a year, in order to process them in bulk. Twice a year, adepts were taken to a workshop in Kolodishi, and for each of the 10 groups there was an unlucky villager who had to be disenchanted. Leon, could you show it to me? That's exactly where we're going. But how did you know what I would want to look at it? That I would want to look at it? Because everyone asks. Leon said indifferently. They think I'm deceiving them and slowly releasing demons to incite them against the magicians. Well, I had nothing like that in my thoughts. It's just like the week before last, we held a colloquium on the topic the structure and principle of operation of the magical circles, and creepy stories about witches' circles naturally wove into the discussion. And one of the stories actually happened about 200 years ago when the active circle was activated from the opposite side by their magician, and all kinds of undead came pouring into our world. Until yeah, until the trial case, until the magicians closed the passage, until the king put together a worthy army, and and weaponsmiths and druids supplied the warriors with enchanted weapons and amulets, the creatures managed to take over a good third of Beloria. Not surprising that the Gavas Witches' Circle aroused remarkable curiosity in me. I know it wasn't, Leon interrupted my indignant thoughts. So, as an exception, I'll show you. Moreover, one stone is missing anyway. I was still wondering if this was a hint, but the vampire had already found a barely noticeable path and beckoned me to follow him. Soon the sand crunched underfoot. The path became covered with cobblestones and twisted among grey pointed boulders. On the side of one of them, a graceful long-tailed lizard froze like a bright malachite brooch. It smoothly turned its head, watching us. The road was blocked by low rocks that looked like stumps torn apart by lightning. I stopped, and Leon came closer to a smooth stone wall entwined with dark green ivy. He parted the thin string of lashes and of not of lashes of vines, and showed me a rune carved into the stone, enclosed in a diamond shape. I raised my palm to it and immediately pulled it away. The symbol was slightly warm. What is this? A lock. Where is the key? Leon smiled. Do you need the key? No, but I'm afraid you will miss the cute rock. Are you giving up? Leon sat down on a stone and picked up the hem of his cloak. Grey eyes narrowed mockingly. Well, step aside, I warned, rolling up my sleeves. Unsealing the entry spell is not an easy task. I made several passes, feeling the rock. It responded with a slight pulsation. The entrance really existed and was enchanted by an expert in his field. The worst thing is that I didn't know the meaning of the rune that served as a hint, so I couldn't weave it into a counterspell and use it as a master key. I had to start from scratch. So I sketched out a 3-stage spell matrix, filled it with constants and estimated values of density, strength, and vector direction of energy, threw out my hand and pummeled the rock with an improvised crowbar. Leon turned around like a spring, jumped at me, knocked me down, pinned me to the ground, and the reflected spell flew over the clearing like a whistling and hooting spindle. Raising my head, I watched in amazement as the tops of the oak trees, cut at right angles, fell majestically, clinging to the lower branches. "You could have warned me," I said indignantly, pushing the vampire away with my elbow. Leon jumped up and brushed himself off, looking with regret at his grass-green now cloak. "Would you have listened?" "No," I wrinkled my nose and shook my head. "Will there be a second attempt?" the vampire asked sarcastically. "Now, excuse me." "Get down!" This time, I was on top. The spell probably met another rock on its way, was reflected, and returned. Before it could fly back into the forest, I neutralized it, spraying it into a bunch of tail sparks. Leon's back trembled under me. In the first moment, it seems to me that he was beaten in death convulsions, but in fact, the vampire was shaking with internalized laughter, which at times broke out into grunting sobs. "Stop it immediately!" I flared up, falling off his back and crawling to the side. I was angry with Lon. I was ready to throw hands. But the obvious comedy of the situation tied me hand and foot. Freaking Jester. I'm pretty sure he tested all the magicians in turn with this rock. I wonder if anyone managed to open it. But he not only did not calm down, but also infected me. We laughed like crazy, unable to get up. It's unlikely that the venerable old man had so much fun lying under the vampire. "Leon, how old are you?" I remembered, still choking with laughter. The vampire somehow immediately became sad and hesitated, but still answered. 73 years old. Oh shit. 73 years old. How much? I gasped, losing the remains of my fun. 879 months, Lon clarified with a sign, getting up and giving me his hand. Stunned, I remained sitting wide-eyed at him. "Really?" "I only speak the truth." The vampire bent down, unceremoniously grabbed me under the arms and set me on my feet. "You could be my great-grandfather." I felt very, very uncomfortable. Even the forest somehow darkened and became silent, hanging accusingly over my head. Well, when will I stop stepping on the same rake? At first I mistook the Lord of the Geva for an impudent lover of bathing maidens. Yeah, like there was something to look at. Now for a frivolous undergrowth who received the throne by inheritance. How old are the elders then? One is 240, the rest are about 300. Wow, my teacher is 174, and his grey beard is longer than any other braid. What? Is there a direct correlation between a beard and intelligence? Leon joked as usual. Come on, it's not a matter of age. We live longer and age much slower, that's all. In terms of your in terms of your human count, I'm about 20 years old. My heart was relieved a little. So, will you show me the witch's circle? Old brat, and hastily added, please. This is where we should have started. Look. Leon threw his cloak behind his back, carefully removed the diadem, and brought it to the wall, holding it by the sides. It seemed to me that the diadem began to tremble in his hands. A tiny green dot lit up in the depth of the emerald, blinked and spread throughout the stone with a warm glow which quickly strengthened, released long sharp rays, and almost felt the rune, leaving golden spark marks. After a short pause, the sparks merged. The golden copy of the rune slowly separated from the granite and hung 2 inches from the wall. The vampire turned the diadem like a key in the wall. 2 turns to the left, 3 to the right. The rune rotated with it, and in the end it turned green and melted into the air. A muffled rumble came from the depth of the earth, and the rock obediently crawled to the side, its stone soul rustling along the sand. Leon brushed his hair off his forehead and pressed it to the diadem. Well, let's go. Want it close? As long as I have the diadem, it won't. But what if someone takes it from you? Unless they take it off a corpse. Chapter 12. The cave was dark but dry. It was just that underfoot there was an unpleasant crunching and soiling sound, like in the lair of cannibal goblins. I shook my hand and a shining, edge-pointed pulsar rolled into my palm. Moving my fingers, I made it fly up, and it fluttered like a night butterfly over my right shoulder. Lowering my eyes, I found myself walking briskly through the caked droppings and bones of bats, swarming in large numbers under the cave roof. A dozen flyers, awakened by the light, fell from the ceiling and circled above our heads with a squeaking. I caught the pulsar in my fist like a fly, crumpled it, and absorbed it. In vain, the vampire approached. You'll need it soon. If I need it, I'll call it. Leon quickly and confidently led me along the wall. The darkness turned out to be not so pitch black, and raising my head, I saw a wide, zigzag-like crack in the roof of a cave, through which a belated bat was just flying. Is it emergency exit? I chuckled. Or the service entrance? It depends on how you look. You can't get out of here, and you cannot get in from there. You shouldn't waste your energy and health climbing a steep cliff. You won't find even a tiny crack there. But what about the bats? Bats have poor vision and rely more on hearing to detect reflected sounds. You see, protection only works for those who believe in it. And bats, as well as you, fly first and think later. Is it an insult? I inquired suspiciously. It's a compliment. Come on, release your firefly. The pulsar ruffled its rays, melting the darkness. I noticed another rune hole, but Leon, without stopping, walked straight through the wall, and I had to follow him, shivering from the grave cold exuded by the granite. The narrow corridor curved up and down, and every now and then I tripped over something or hit the top of my head on the ceiling, not keeping up with the confidently walking and ducking vampire in time. Jesus Christ, stop texting me, people. At the end of the corridor, another enchanted wall awaited us. Leon casually touched it with his hand, and it seemed to melt into a spot of blinding light. I timidly stepped into it after the Lord and froze, amazed. Even on a tour of Olga, the mountain catacombs of dwarfs, I didn't see anything like it. A mountain range borders Beloria from the east, blocking access to the sea. And the main source of income for Elgar dwarfs is the duty collected for transporting goods through a specially hollowed out tunnel, the only one in the whole of Elgar. Thus, the bearded people actually control the seaports and the fleet of Beloria, in which case and the fleet of Beloria, threatening to blow up the passage to the mysterious Cavrusian mother in any case, which happens quite often and forces the king to hastily revise the customs price tax. The lazy dwarfs have completely abandoned the the mining industry, raised the prices of precious metals and weapons, high quality but produced in scanty quantities, and hang around starving taverns, absorbing incredible amounts of beer. And no one could do anything about them, fearing another filial appeal. Almit was the one who took us adepts on the excursion. The malicious grins of the dwarfs upon entering confused, confused him somewhat, and I decided that they were caused by common and undoubtedly amusing memories. We were taken through Arkrel, the main tunnel, briefly told about the richest deposits from afar. Unfortunate incidents happened, Almit explained, blushing for some reason. They showed us piles of diamonds, rubies, and emeralds, in such quantities, not really causing any emotions. In the grinding shop, I was fascinated by the already processed marble tiles. whose colors resembled the cut of moldy cheese, from barely spoiled to lush green. An unfortunate incident was brewing, but the dwarf accompanying us with a broad gesture allowed the girls to choose a pebble for themselves. One small pebble, the dwarf added fearfully, seeing, however, approaching a huge, obviously tombstone. So that would be enough for everyone. We also admired the semi-precious veins glistening in the grey walls of all kinds of caves. Dry and half flooded. Listen to the legend about the lanky, withered arm man living underwater and making a living as making a living on distracted miners. After which we flew out of there as if scolded. After examining the excursion part of the catacombs, with which Elgar is riddled like an old barn with mouse passages, we followed the dwarf guide to Est Alley, a museum where the most interesting samples of stones collected during the thousand-year development of the mountain are kept. Almid, in general a young, healthy and blooming man, gradually faded and turned pale, slowly moving to the tail of the sprawling procession, and in every possible way slowed down our progress, clinging to the walls and barely moving his feet, as if he was walking along a narrow cornice over an abyss. Narrow ledge over an abyss. In the dim grim light of the smoky torches, we ourselves did not look the best, resembling a procession of ghouls who had not eaten for a long time, led by a half-decomposed dwarf, so no one really paid attention to the metamorphoses that were taking place with the master. The museum turned out to be a low, narrow square cave with grey, rough walls. We crowded into it like way nope, like mushrooms into a barrel, supporting the exhausted Almit with our strong young shoulders. A ruby the size of a suckling pig lit up scarlet lights in the eyes of the adepts. Vajak, puffing, tried to lift a gold nugget in the shape of a goblet, standing steadily on a long stem. Not impressive, I said. The only advantage of the exhibits was their size. According to rumors, in the bowels of Earth, at a depth of over 1,000 cubits, there was a second museum, Estian Kuma, where stones with magical properties were kept. But even ordinary dwarfs, let alone humans, were not allowed there. Then Almit rolled his eyes, slid off our shoulders onto the floor, and remained motionless. Our scream of horror merged with the ecstatic cry of the dwarf. But there was no time to think and compare facts. The guys hastily dragged Almit out of the cave and laid the lifeless body of their mentor on the sun-warmed stone at the entrance to the catacombs. The dwarfs no longer digged. They laughed out loud, spreading the good news among their brothers with incomprehensible delight, and even sending a messenger deep into Olga. To our unspeakable relief, after a couple of minutes, the master came to his senses and sat down, looking around wildly, and we learned that the unfortunate man suffers from claustrophobia, and annual excursions, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, always end up in such a pitiful way. And The dwarfs are already bet on what place he will reach and where he will be carried out from. Mm. Please don't freeze. Sorry, my hair stuck a little bit. My connection has been weird, as it does occasionally. Well, I guess it's a good moment for anyone to take a break. We're still having a small break here. Okay, I feel like it's going to take a lot of time, so yeah, I will stop recording here. We'll probably continue next time.